What's up, and welcome back to the Counterculture podcast. I'm here with my husband and co host, Grant.
Hey, y'all.
Today's episode is going to be all about trusting in Jesus. This is such an exciting episode to talk about. I feel like this is one of the foundational things that a Christian needs, everyone needs in their life. So let's just get into it.
Sounds great.
So, yeah, trusting in Jesus. I think
Yep.
this is a whole lot easier said than done, but it's one of the most foundational things a Christian can have, I think.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
If you can't trust in the Lord, it's going to be really, really hard to
Yeah.
live a Christian life.
Yeah. And I think so many people say, well, just trust the Lord, trust in Jesus. But I think in this episode we really want to talk about what that actually looks like, because so many people use that example and just say it in everyday terms. But I think the actual act of trusting in Jesus, it really requires a lifestyle shift,
Yeah.
and every decision, every day you wake up, it's a decision like, am I going to trust Jesus? And that's something we've had to learn, we've had to walk through specifically. And we're in one of those seasons now, just trusting in the Lord. And again, you can't just say it and then wait for something big to happen. You really have to live it out. So I think one of the first things that comes to my mind, like a good example of trusting in Jesus, is even when you don't know the next step, you just have to be able to say, "You know what? Like this is in the Lord's hands." But I think starting off, I do wanna say that you can't just not do anything and then say, "Oh, it's in the Lord's hands. I trust Jesus." You have to really know that you're in his will, and he will confirm that for you. But if you know that you're in his will, that's when you really just have to put your hands up
Hmm.
and say, "The Lord brought me here. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm trusting in
Yeah.
Jesus." You know?
Yeah. You can't. That's really good. You can't just sit back
Yeah.
and just assume really anything,
Yeah.
unless he's told you go somewhere and wait. You have to assume that he has a work for you
Mhm.
when you get there. So you've
Yeah.
got to be just seeking after his will every day and just looking for that next step. What am I doing here? Why am I here? What do you want me to do, Lord? So that you do not go and follow his direction, go somewhere, and then sit on your hands, and that opportunity that you were there for passes you by because you thought you were just supposed to go.
Mhm.
When in reality, he was saying go. And then if you got there and then listened, he would have said, and do this.
Yeah.
But you didn't hear the second part
Yeah.
because you weren't listening and weren't seeking after
That's
his
so
will.
good. And the scripture verse, trust in God with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding.
Yeah.
So when you're in that moment of like, okay, I'm here, what next, Lord? You can't just like default back into your own routines, your own systems, your own beliefs, because the whole point is to get there. That's the first step. Sometimes the Lord will give you the first step. Go do this just to see if you actually will. He's not going
Yep.
to give you the entire plan laid out in front of you for you to just do it or not because it sounds good. He's going to give you the first step. And if you really do trust in him and you decide to do it and you go, the most important thing is to continue on that path, because now you really are risking things
Right.
and you've stepped out in faith. You have to continue through and say, "You know what? I'm not going to lean on my own understanding. It doesn't matter if I understand this, because we don't have the capability of understanding what he has for us." So that's the beauty of trusting in Jesus, is just saying yes in every step. Yes, Lord, I'm going to do it. Yes. And he's wanting to see if we will listen. And so there may not be something huge out of this season of listening to Jesus, something specific. It might just be he's preparing you for a new season, something that will bring something huge out of it, but he's preparing you in the little steps.
Mhm.
And he's just seeing, even just if you wake up in the morning and the Lord's saying, text this person, message, just reach out to this person. And you're like, oh, that's probably just me thinking that, whatever. If you're not in the spirit and you're not really discerning whose voice it is, you're not even going to pick up on that was the Lord telling you to reach out to that person, as just a little test to see if you're going to listen to him, because
Mhm.
he has something waiting on you that he's trying to guide you towards. So if you can't be faithful in the little things and just, oh, I think that was the Lord speaking, I'm just going to reach out to that person with really no other information. You have to be okay with looking a little bit weird as a Christian. That's something that just comes along with it.
Right.
If you can be faithful in those little things and just saying, okay, I'm going to reach out to this person, or I'm going to take this different route to work instead of my usual, because you might run into someone, or just whatever it is, just knowing that nothing big has to come out of it, as long as you're listening to the Lord, that's where you need to be. So if he tells you to do something, just do it and trust in him.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think honestly, when I read the Bible, my favorite example of trusting God is Abraham.
Yeah,
Just
so good.
so many times where he was not given any information, he was only given one instruction. And that man just said, whatever you want me to do,
Yeah.
living in a time where families stick together for 3 and 4 generations and you don't leave. You don't just pack up and move across the country like you do now. I mean, you stay together and your great great grandparents are buried in your family cemetery. That's the norm. You work the same plot of land and it provides for you as you work it. All of those things. The Lord said to Abraham, pack up your things and leave. And he didn't even tell him where to go. He just said, you leave and then I will tell you where to go.
Mhm.
And he just packed everything up, packed up all his belongings, packed up his family unit, and left. And just completely trusted the Lord. And then the Lord guided him to the land of Canaan, which ended up being the promised land. Just so many blessings in Abraham's life that come directly from trusting God. The most blatant example of trusting God that I can find in the Bible is Abraham and Isaac. God told Abraham, go and sacrifice your son on Mount Ararat, build an altar, sacrifice your son to me. And this is after God had promised Abraham an heir in his old age. Abraham and Sarah, then Abram and Sarai, were well past childbearing age. I think Sarai was 90 or 100 years old at the time that God gave them this promise that they were going to be a father of many nations. And she even laughed. She just laughed to herself, like, that's impossible. I'm well past childbearing age. That just can't happen. Well, it did. God promised them this son, and then he changed their names from Abram and Sarai to Abraham and Sarah. And then they have this child, Isaac, this promised child from God. And it wasn't 10 or 12 years later, God is coming to Abraham saying, Abraham, go up to the mountains of Ararat and sacrifice Isaac to me. I want to take a quick detour here because this specific story is the best example in the Bible that I can find for knowing the Lord's voice. That story is just mind-blowing to me. I mean, in no way is sacrificing your son something that we would expect the God of the Bible to ask us to do. But God had a reason, and he's God, so he had a right to ask Abraham to do that. But truthfully, he was only doing it to test Abraham's faith, to see if Abraham truly loved him more than he loved the promised son that he had given Abraham. Speaking candidly, if I heard that, if God promised us a son and we were like 60, and then we have a son, and then God says, sacrifice your son, I'm going to say, oh, that's not from God. God wouldn't ask that. First of all, this is God's promised son. But second of all, he's not going to ask you to kill somebody like that, not to sacrifice them. That's just not a thing that God would ask. But Abraham was so in tune with God's voice that he knew immediately this was God speaking. So he didn't even have to wrestle with the fact with like, oh, who said that? Was that my mind, my flesh, the enemy, God? Just the thought. He didn't have to wrestle with any of that. He just had to decide, was he going to trust God and do what God had asked? And I know we're talking about trusting God right now, but I think if you can really nail down hearing the Lord's voice and knowing the Lord's voice, it says in the New Testament, my sheep know my voice. If you can nail that down, the second part becomes much easier because the fact of the matter is we know God's character. We have seen it time and time again throughout the entire Bible, throughout the Old Testament and throughout the New Testament. Just we know his character. And it becomes very easy to trust somebody when you know their character. When you know that this person has one, never lied, two, never sinned when he was on earth as in a physical body, never sinned, three, loves you beyond anything you can compare to, and four, wants the best for you. Those are all biblical truths, 100% guaranteed. And you know those four things. You know that he can't make a mistake, that he can't lie, it becomes very easy to just say, I know this is what God told me to do. So all I have to do is let go and just do this thing. And whatever happens, it will be okay because that's what God has ordained to happen. That's the beauty of trusting God. We know his character. We can choose to just let go and let God.
Yeah, I think, and you mentioned about hearing the Lord's voice, and that needs to be like step 1. I think a lot of people get confused on the Lord's voice, and they'll kind of just put their hands up and say, it's in the Lord's hands. Nothing is in the Lord's hands unless you give it to him. And so you can't just say, I'll forget about it, it'll be okay because God's in control. God's not in control. We talked about that in the last episode or a previous episode. God is not in control of your life because he is a just God. If it were up to him, if he was in control, bad things wouldn't happen. We've gotten into all of that in the last episode. But you have to be able to say, Lord, I'm giving this to you because I don't know what to do. You have to be able to make that connection and to say, this isn't up to me. I'm not just gonna not do anything. I'm gonna give this to you. And you have to know the Lord's character. In order to trust someone, you have to know who they are. You can't just blindly say, okay, I'm just gonna let you handle this. You don't even know what they're gonna do.
Right.
It's a common thing with people. You don't just say this stranger, yeah, why don't you just handle this in my life? Just figure it out. You have to know who you're trusting. And so I think the most important thing is to read the Bible and to learn who you're putting your trust in. And then it becomes so much easier. So if you read your Bible and you know the Lord's character, then you're going to recognize his voice because of what he's saying. For instance, you don't know his character, you don't know what he's about. Then when the enemy comes along and says, you should move states, you should just move to this state, it's not something necessarily bad, but if you're not used to being in tune with the Lord, knowing his character, or maybe it's just even like you shouldn't go to church today. Let's use that as an example. If something's just telling you I shouldn't go to church today and you're like, "Oh, that's probably the Lord." Like, maybe I could get in a car wreck and the Lord's trying to save me from that. So I'm just not going to go to church. You have to know the Lord's character. So the Lord would never tell you to just not go to church or to just not read your Bible, to not tithe. You have to know his character so that when the enemy comes along and says, you should just save your money this week. You don't have to give it away. Just this week, save your money and like do this with it instead. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's probably the Lord. Like, because he's talking about tithing. You have to be aware enough to know the Lord would never tell you. He doesn't go against his word. He said, give 10%, give your first fruits. These are the foundations of Christianity. And so the Lord wouldn't do that. And unless you read your Bible, you really wouldn't be able to know. If you're confused on if it's your own thoughts, the enemy's voice, or the Lord's voice, you just have to know the Lord's character enough to be able to decipher between who's actually speaking to you. And I will say, the Bible says that God is not the God of confusion. He will never be confusing you. So if you're really confused in this one area and you're just like, I have no idea, that's the enemy
Mhm.
because he doesn't want you to sit down and pray. As soon as you sit down and pray, the Lord will tell you what you're supposed to do. But if you're just constantly confused in this one area, you don't know what to do, that's the enemy trying to pull you away from the Lord because God is not the God of confusion. He's the God of clarity, of peace. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're hearing the Lord's voice and when you're trying to decipher because yes, you do have to know who's speaking and you have to know what the Lord is saying in order to trust him. But it is also okay. I know when I was first starting out listening to the Lord's voice, like I'm not really sure, but I'm just going to go with it. I would just tell the Lord, like, Lord, I'm confused in this area. I think this is you. Please shut the door in this area if it's not. If I'm hearing you wrong, just do not let it happen. And it wouldn't. If you get it wrong, like that's okay.
Yeah.
But at least you're coming back to the Lord and still putting it in his hands. And that's what I mean when I first said, like, you can't just put your hands up and say, oh, well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
You have to always be telling the Lord, like, Lord, I think this is you. I'm going to go with it. Shut the door if it's not supposed to happen. And he will. He will protect you from that
Yeah.
as long as you're putting that instance in his hands.
Mhm.
Because if you don't, he's not going to just barge in and, do something crazy. He never
Yeah.
forces himself on anyone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think you have to know the Lord's character in order to trust him and also in order to know his voice. And another big thing, like I was saying, you have to have discernment because knowing the Lord's character lets you apply steadfast rules to every situation. But then discernment allows you to really know the specifics in every different situation. Like
That's good.
like in the case of Abraham and Isaac. Child sacrifice is an abomination to the Lord. It is absolutely, totally terrible to the Lord. Even in the Old Testament, there was a lot of animal sacrifice because they were under the law. There was never child sacrifice in Christianity or Judaism ever. Not the Old Testament, not the New Testament. It's always been an abomination. Many, many cultures and civilizations were judged in the Old Testament because they would not turn from crazy religions that included things like child sacrifice. So that's just not something that the Lord would ever ask for, except that with Abraham, he did. Now, if you're not familiar with the story, he had a goal with that, and it wasn't ever to see Isaac actually die. He wanted to test Abraham's faith to the extreme level because Abraham would be the father of his chosen people. And so he had to know that above all else, this man was going to trust him no matter what. And so when he finally did see that Abraham was willing and was about to sacrifice his own son, then he provided a ram stuck in the thistle so that they could sacrifice that ram instead. There's a lot of symbolism there. It's a really beautiful story. It really is. But my point is, that's where you have to have discernment. Because even when it doesn't feel like God's character, it may still be God telling you because you're just not seeing the whole picture.
Mhm.
You're not seeing the whole picture. So you got to have discernment. I think that's probably the most important thing that I have learned over the past 5, 10 years is all of the logic and the knowledge is great for most of it. The real nitty gritty little things, that's where you need discernment. You've got to have discernment to know exactly, yes, this is the Lord. I can feel it in my spirit. Or like, oh no, something feels off about that. I really need to pray this through more because that doesn't feel right. I don't know. That's just been my experience. What do you
That's
think?
good. That's really good. Yeah, and I think a lot of times trusting Jesus, it's not for him, it's for you. You have to
Mm,
be able to trust Jesus. He's never going to fail you, never once. But that's hard to just know that and then to just blindly say, okay, it's in your hands, Lord. You have to do it enough to where it becomes your default. You have to do it and have experience to say, you know what? I trusted him in this and he didn't let me down. I trusted him in this, he didn't let me down. So when it's this huge thing, you can say, well, he's never failed me before. I'm going to trust him in that. So that's really why it's so important to do it with the little things, not just these big life decisions, because
yeah.
you're not going to have enough times to look back on to say, it worked out here. So it must for this really big thing. You have to really make it a lifestyle before you can just blindly say, "Okay, I'm gonna give it to you, Lord." And in my life, it started out just at a young age. It was like I would be driving to work, and I've used this example a lot, but I would be driving to work and I would just feel like maybe I should go this different way. And I was like, "Why would I do that? Like that's so random." But I would do it, and there really wouldn't be a reason, like some big way that I knew it was the Lord. Like, "Oh, this is why." But I knew it was the Lord, and I knew he was just testing me. So, you don't always know that it's like, "Oh, that was the Lord. He saved me from this wreck from on Main Street, and that's why I took the interstate. Thank you, Lord." It's like you may not always have the evidence of why I was supposed to listen to the Lord, but I know that I did. Sometimes I would just feel like, "Go to this grocery store instead of the other one." I would just feel like it was the Lord, and I would go and nothing crazy would happen. I would just be like, "Oh, okay." And then it would be, go hang out with this person instead of staying at home or take this job instead. The things started getting bigger.
Hmm.
I truly think it saved me from a lot. I don't know what it saved me from, but I knew the Lord's voice to a point that I knew he was telling me, and I knew he was testing me. I knew he was just seeing if I would listen, without some big conclusion of why I trusted him or like why it was correct to trust him in that area. Just seeing if I would. So that when the really big decisions came along, what college are you going to go to, who you're going to marry, when you're going to have kids, that you're not really stressed out because you have all of these instances these cases where I've trusted the Lord and He's always come through for me. A really big thing that came to my mind with this episode in trusting Jesus is my last year of college. I had pretty much been taking all of these nursing classes. I was going to be a nurse and I was working in the hospital just to see if I would like it. I worked there for about a year, a little over, and I just realized I didn't like it. It was not for me, and I didn't want to waste my degree. I was so close. I think I had like one more semester to where I would have gotten my degree. And so I was like, well, I really don't want to just throw away all my classes and not have a degree, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so it was that summer I worked. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to get my degree in just to kind of have something. And typically you sign up for classes the semester before. Waiting is not really the right decision in that area because classes fill up so much you won't get to take the class.
Right.
And we were going to be getting married pretty soon afterwards. I think it was like the next semester. So I really
Yeah.
wanted to finish up all my classes that fall and be done with school, get married. And I remember that whole summer I was praying like, "Lord, what should I do?" And he just kept telling me to wait, wait, wait. And I think I had decided some random degree that I didn't end up getting.
That rings a bell. Yeah. Do you remember what it was?
I don't remember. I think it was just something that I felt like I should do. It was in the medical field. I was like, "Oh, I'm just going to get
It was
this."
psychology, wasn't it?
Psychology, something like
Yeah.
that. And I was like, "I already have most of the classes. I'll just take 3 more and actually graduate with a degree."
Mm.
I'd pretty much just known in the back of my mind, like, this is what I'm gonna do, and the Lord just kept saying, "Wait, wait, wait." I kept seeing all of these classes fill up, the weeks were going by. Finally, all of the classes were full, and it wasn't an option anymore, and I was like, "Lord, I just wanna be done with school before I get married." Like, I wanted to finish all of this. I have, like, 15 of the 18 classes. I could take 3 more and actually have a degree. I really don't wanna waste this. And he just kept saying, "Wait, wait." And finally, it was the week of beginning of classes, and everyone was asking me, like, "Okay, like, what are you gonna be doing?" All of my employers, and I was telling them, like, "I'm going to school, I'm going to college." And they're like, "What are you taking? What are you gonna do?" And I was like, "I don't know. I can't tell you what I'm gonna do, but I know I'm going. Classes start in 4 days. I know I'm doing something."
Wow.
And they just looked at me like I was crazy. I already had the money set aside. I was just waiting to get my books. I was like, "I don't know what degree I'm getting, but I know I'm starting classes next week." And it came down to, like, tomorrow, and I still hadn't signed up for anything. All the classes were full for psychology, for nursing, like, nothing really was an option anymore. And then the Lord told me, like, the night before to get my degree in human services, and there was literally, like, 1 spot left in each of the classes that I needed, and I signed up, and I was there on campus the next day, taking my classes. Everything was paid for and done, and it was little things like that, like, if I hadn't listened to the Lord, I would have gotten the wrong degree,
Yeah.
and because of the degree I got, I was able to get a work from home job that I've worked for the past 3.5 years. Little things like that, and I look back on that I'm like, "Man, that was the Lord." If I hadn't
Yeah.
listened, I wouldn't have gotten to work from home. I would have had a degree in psychology or something weird,
Mhm.
never would have used it. Like, the Lord's never let me down, so why would I question him in just a bigger area? It's just a different area for him.
Yeah.
It's only bigger to me, you know?
That's so cool.
And I had another example of a time where I just kind of handed a situation to the Lord, and that's okay to do. Like, if you just don't wanna figure it out for yourself, just put it in the Lord's hands and truly give it to him, and that was, like, my relationship. I had never dated anybody or had a relationship, but I just knew that it was too much for me to, like, choose my spouse, choose who I was gonna marry. So I just kind of gave that to the Lord, I think when I was, like, 14 or 15, and I just prayed all the time. And I've used this example a lot, but I specifically prayed that the Lord would just give me this feeling, a sign. A lot of people call it love at first sight, whatever the worldly terms of it. But I just was like, "Lord, I'm going to keep my head down until you tell me like that's the one, and then I'll know." The first time that I ever saw you, I had that moment of like, that's the one. You waited and he's the one. A lot of people get so stressed out because they think it's up to them. Like if they're not constantly looking, constantly like paying attention to those around them, like how are they going to find a spouse if they're not going out? If they're not going to Bible studies and little church groups and
Mhm.
things, like how are you going to meet someone? For me, I didn't do any of that. Like I really didn't like the whole church small group dating scene, like, that just wasn't really for me. So I was like, "I'm not gonna do anything, and I'm just gonna give it to you, Lord." I didn't just do anything and not give it to the Lord, because that's you're not gonna get anything out of that. You have to just step back and give it to the Lord. Both are
Right.
very crucial.
Right.
I made it clear, like, "Lord, this is in your hands," and I didn't try to, like, do anything about it. And it was just so nice to be able to just know all of a sudden, like, "That's the one."
Yeah.
And I trusted the Lord. I was like, "Okay, that's awesome."
Even when you knew that I was the one, you told me before, you didn't know, like, when it was gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Like,
was
you
like,
thought
"I'm
it was
not
gonna be,
gonna
like, another
go."
decade or something.
Yeah, I was like, "I'm not gonna initiate anything." Like, that doesn't
Yeah.
mean I'm gonna sacrifice my values.
Right.
And I wanted a very traditional, like the man approaches the
Yeah.
woman. So I was like, "Well."
Well, and props to you for that too, because I didn't know that she had that vision until after we were married. Not
Yeah.
even when we were engaged did she tell me that had happened.
I think we had been married for, like, a good little while,
We had.
like a
Yeah.
year maybe.
Yeah, and then you were telling me like, "Oh, yeah, it was crazy, like, all these crazy coincidences happened, and, like, I had a vision," and I'm
You're
just
like,
like,
"What?"
"That's crazy,"
Yeah.
because I don't know if I could have done it, like, to not say any of that,
Yeah.
you know?
I didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, I mean, you had crazy coincidence, like, even
I
the way
know.
you grew up with your mom telling you, like, even if the Lord has to
Yeah.
bring you a godly man from Alaska, he
She
can do
always said
that.
that.
Like, just picking the most random state.
The
Well,
most
yeah, I
far
grew up
away.
there. I was born in Alaska, I grew up there, I lived there
Yeah.
until I was 17, and I moved down here, and 2 years later, I meet you.
Yeah. It's
Just
crazy.
insane coincidences all the way through. Like, our life stories were just braided together before we even knew each other,
Yeah.
you know?
'Cause we really had no way of meeting each other.
Oh,
We
no.
would never have
No.
met unless it was at that
We
wedding.
have we have one connection between the 2 of us,
Yeah.
and that is your friend is now my sister-in-law. And
Yeah.
other than that, there is 0 connection between our families, our circles, no
I mean,
church, no school.
we live across the country
Yeah.
from each other. We would
Yep.
have never met. Our
Yep.
churches, like, nothing was in the same circle.
Well, and I had just graduated high school too, so I would have been moving back
Yeah.
very shortly,
Yeah.
you know?
But I didn't, and I knew he was from Alaska, so I was like, "Okay, so does that mean I'm gonna live in Alaska, or, like, how's that gonna work?"
Right.
But I didn't really ask any questions. I just knew that I had met my future husband, and whenever it happened, it would happen. But the Lord was faithful, and he gave me that feeling. He said, "That's the one. You're looking at your future husband." I was like, "Oh my word." And he did give me a vision, which we go into all of that, like, in our story of how we met. But the point is, I handed it to the Lord and I stepped away, and he's proved to me so many times that he will take care of the situation if you do that. You can't still try to be controlling it. Like, I didn't have dating apps. I wasn't going out and talking to people. I didn't entertain any, guys or anything, like texting them just to see, like, nothing. I mean, if the Lord didn't put it right in front of me, I would have had no way of knowing. So I think it's in combination with that. And I mean, if you say, like, Lord, I don't know where to move, I don't know which house I'm supposed to buy, you are gonna have to, like, put it in my face. That means deleting Zillow. Like, don't go driving by houses. Don't go looking up on Google, like, best neighborhoods to live in, like
Mhm.
nothing. And you'll just be walking by and some guy will say, like, "Will you please buy my house?" Like big things like that.
Yeah.
And you'll just be like, "Oh," like, you won't have to look for it. You won't have to know anything. And that's with any area of life, and I can say confidently through experience that he's never let me down, and if you give it to him and step away, trusting Jesus is, like, the best thing
Yeah.
to do.
It totally is. It gives me such a sense of relief,
Yeah.
you know? Because we talk a lot about roles, gender roles, and just roles in general in this podcast. We're always talking about how the wife is feminine and the helper and submissive and just amazing like you, and
You're
then the
so
man is
sweet.
supposed to be masculine and the provider and the protector and the leader.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll get so caught up in my responsibilities, like I have to lead, I have to make these decisions, I have to, and like now,
Mhm.
because time, we're on the clock, time's running out. But I forget that one of the best, most effective tools in my arsenal, in my tool belt, is just to give it to God and let Him do it.
Mhm.
Because just like you are supposed to submit to me, I'm supposed to submit to Him.
Mhm.
And He, the Bible says, cast all your cares on Him, for He cares for you.
Mhm.
And so you can do that. You can say, Lord, this is what I'm trying to figure out. I need your help in this area. Please show me. You just ask him to guide you and it becomes much easier
Mhm.
after you've done that.
Yeah, and I think I used to ask for signs all the time
Mhm.
growing up because I didn't know his voice yet. I was still learning.
Mhm.
So when you're in that beginner stage of like, I have no idea, am I actually going to hear his voice like a voice? Is it going to be like a feeling? Like I have no clue. I would ask for like, Lord, just have someone like confirm it for me today. And someone would be walking down the street and telling me just like whatever it was. And I'd be like, oh, okay, so that is the Lord's voice. You only need like two, three, four times of those signs of him just putting it out in front of you,
Right.
and then you recognize, "Oh, so that was the Lord's voice." So then when you hear that again, you don't have to ask for a sign, you've already heard it,
Right.
and you've confirmed that that was him, so that's how
Yeah.
you do that.
Yeah, that's definitely something that you can do. There's a Bible verse that says, "Beware of those who are constantly asking for signs."
Yeah,
But I truthfully believe what that's saying is eventually you need to grow past that.
yeah,
Because as you learn the Lord's voice, you don't need the signs every time.
yeah,
And what that Bible verse is saying is like, beware of those who haven't grown past that yet, because they are not truthfully growing any closer to the Lord. They're just depending on him to show them a sign and
mhm,
not truly trusting him, because trusting is doing without seeing. I think there's a better way to say that, but I can't really think of any better way to say it right now. When you ask for a sign, you're asking to see.
mhm,
And if you can't get to the place where you know him well enough to trust him without that sign, then you're not truly growing any closer to the Lord. So
yeah,
that's what I think that verse is talking about.
yeah,
But definitely, I've asked for signs in the past. Still, every once in a while I will.
mhm.
It's a great way to just get recentered. I just think we have to be careful not to do it every time.
Yeah. I think it's dangerous when you grow away from listening to the Lord's voice so much that, like, you have to ask for a sign again because you
Yeah.
don't even remember what his voice sounded like. But
Yeah,
in
it's
the
scary.
beginning stages, yeah, you have to learn, but then you should be so used to doing it, you don't really need the sign ever because you're so used to it. But growing away from it and then coming back to it, it's like that's where that's on you. You know, you really need to not go that long without knowing what the Lord is telling you because you have to make sure daily that you're asking the Lord, like, Lord, let your will be done. Guide me. Let me be in your will.
Mhm.
Show me. And then you have to do it. You can't just stray from Him for so long that it's like, I don't really know. And then I'm going to make some big life decision. You're like, Lord, where are you? And it's like, you haven't asked me to be with you in any of the small steps. It's just since you're moving, it's just since you're going to a new school. It's like you have to be asking the Lord what his will is and being in it in the everyday,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, that's good. I actually do have a really good example. Actually, an example where I think I didn't do what I was supposed to do.
Oh,
So we were married at this point. I was looking for a truck, and I was looking for a very specific truck. The color, the wheelbase, everything. I had everything down to the exact model, the year, the miles, all of it. And I had only found like three or four for sale on the entire East Coast. And so I was just watching them. None of them were like a screaming good deal. I just kept watching them and praying about them and stuff. And there was one that I felt like I probably should go get, and it was in Massachusetts. It was like a pretty good long ways away from us. It would have been a plane flight and then a 10-hour drive back. Um which is kind of excessive for buying a truck, but that's the one I was looking for. It looked perfect, so I was praying about it pretty seriously. And I told Courtney, I said, I think I should go look at this truck to buy it. And she's like, "Man, I'm not feeling really the blessing on that yet."
I'd also just never flown somewhere to buy a
It
truck,
is
so
a
that was
lot.
hard
Yeah,
for
for
me.
sure. I was watching it, and kind of in my head, I'm like, well, okay, so if it goes lower, if the price drops, then I really feel like I should go. I was at work, working night shift at the time. It was like 9 or 10 at night. I look back on the dealership website. It dropped like $1,200, a price drop. And that really made it really in our price range, like really a good deal for that truck at the time. I immediately screenshot it, text it to Courtney, and she's like, "Oh my goodness, this is crazy." I was literally just praying to the Lord, like, "Lord, if he's supposed to go look at this truck, have it drop in price a little bit." That was it. For us, I pretty much just texted the dealership. I was like, "Hey, I'm interested in this truck. I'll be flying in next week. Can you guarantee it'll be there if I get there?" And they said, "Yeah, that's fine. We'll hold it until you get here to look at it." I fly up there, I look at the truck, I meet a friend of mine, I stay with him, and buy the truck the next day and drive it home. Now, what I was saying I didn't do was I was supposed to go up there and look at that truck. I know for a fact that I was supposed to go up and look at that truck. Looking back now, it's a possibility that I was not supposed to buy that truck because I ended up having to return it because it was really rotted out, a lot of rust that I just did not see because I was just looking for the perfect truck and I didn't look hard enough. It's very clear to me that the Lord said, "Go look at this truck." He did not say blindly go buy this truck. And I think he was trying to teach me how to walk away from things because that is one thing that I've had to learn
That's good.
is how to see exactly what you want and then hear the Lord's voice and walk away from it.
Mhm.
And I think if I had been listening rather than just poring over that truck and looking at every corner, I would have heard the Lord saying, "This isn't the one." It would have felt like a waste because it would have been 2 plane
Yeah.
tickets, a waste of a weekend, time away from my wife, money out of the bank account, all of those things. But that would have been the Lord's will. It's also a possibility that he wanted me to buy that truck for some unknown reason and then return it. Maybe he just wanted me what?
That's just funny, I don't know.
Maybe he just wanted to see if I would listen. But truthfully, I feel like I was not supposed to buy that truck. And so that's what I was saying earlier in the episode. It's very important to hear the first part and to just do the first part and not jump to conclusions
Yeah,
or sit on your hands and just wait for something to happen
yeah,
to you. You've got to be intentional about praying for every step of his process,
yeah.
of his will.
Like, there could have been another truck on that lot that maybe you were supposed to see, but I think we were renting a very old vehicle at the time, saving up to buy our own, and so
Yeah.
I think we were just so ready that as soon as we both got the confirmation to, like, go look at the truck, it was like, "Oh, that automatically means to just buy it."
Right.
I didn't feel great about it, but I also was just, like, distrusting.
Right.
But anyways, we both learned some very valuable lessons throughout our marriage. We'll have to have another
Yeah.
episode talking about everything that we've learned,
Yeah,
but
for sure. Yeah, you're always going to have those learning experiences. At
yeah,
some point, you have to learn those lessons for
yeah,
yourself, and the Lord understands that, and He is faithful and all those things.
yes.
I think we'll leave it to just that one story for today. All right, so guys, thank you so much for watching the Counterculture podcast today. We really appreciate you being here with us and spending time. If you like this content, we drop new episodes of the Counterculture podcast every Monday morning at 6 a.m. on Spotify and YouTube. We also post short form content on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. And with that, I think we're out of here, guys. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye, guys.